watched Saylor carefully, and I've watched his messaging, and it's fascinating to me, and I think highly intelligent on his part, that he is not talking about Bitcoin as a replacement to the dollar, not shitting on the dollar, not talking hyperinflation. I think he knows all of those things are in the cards, but he continues to talk about this just as an investment in digital property and comparing it to Apple and comparing it to Manhattan real estate. And he's just selling it as the best investment. And I think that's really, really smart on his part. And the reason it's so smart is there's no point in pissing off the US government and all these idiots in DC who, if they realize we're going after their dollar, they're much more likely to do the Elizabeth Warren, come after our on and off ramps and tax us and make us disclose our addresses and all that other shit. And so I really respect his approach. And he even asked me in Madeira, kind of tone down the hyperinflation stuff. And I respect that. I get it. It's like, why get the other side all pissed off, about, the fact that this thing's going to crush the dollar, which it will. But why get them pissed off about that? Why not just make this the best digital property, and, the dollar is going to die, whether, irrespective of what Bitcoin and gold do, the dollar is going to die its own death based on the misbehavior of the politicians in DC, I tell people who are looking at investing in my fund, I said, the only way my fund doesn't work is if Washington, DC gets incredibly responsible. And of course, they always laugh. They're like, well, I'm not too worried about that possibility, but it is a possibility.
Happy Bitcoin Wednesday, freaks. It's your host, Odell, here for another Citadel Dispatch, the interactive live show focused on actionable Bitcoin and freedom tech discussion. That intro clip was prolific gold investor turned ride or die Bitcoiner Larry Lepard on what Bitcoin did. Talking about how the dollar is fucked, but we shouldn't talk about it. Freaks, I have a great show lined up today. In-person rip. The in-person rips are always the best rips. Someone who I've gotten to know through the internet, through various calls and interactions, but finally got to meet in person just really moments before this rip. But we're live here from Nashville at Bitcoin Park. And I have Hong Kim with me, co-founder and CTO of Bitwise, most known for their recent Bitcoin ETF. How's it going, Hong?
Going great. Super excited to be here. This studio and space is incredible. Yeah.
It's a little bit ridiculous, right?
Yeah. But yeah, very excited to be here. I'm a big fan of the show.
And freaks, he's not wearing a suit. For what it's worth, he's wearing a Bitwise branded sweatshirt without a hood, so not a hoodie either.
It's I don't really.
There's no video on this rip, so I felt like I should paint the picture for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit unbelievable to me that on Dispatch I have a co-founder of a company that has a Bitcoin ETF live in person. Is kind of a weird timeline for me. I kind of didn't think we were going to have Bitcoin ETFs after like the Winklevoss failed like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Or like 11 years ago. I just assumed that it's just not going to happen for maybe another decade or so. So it's kind of still a little unbelievable we have ETFs now.
It was unbelievable for me as well. We worked on it for 6 years.
That's crazy.
We first filed in 2019, I think. And then, yeah, every 2 or so years, we tried again. And it was, every time, and we thought, and the whole industry thought, that we were just like a year or two away. So it was every year was like a year or two away. And also, like, there's administration changes, like the chairperson changed. So, like, all this change that kind of made it really hard to understand what's happening or not happening. Should we be timing here? Should we not? And we just ended up being stringed along for 6 years. And ultimately, everything that we did didn't really even matter that much. It was ultimately a lawsuit. But yeah, sometimes I find it even hard to believe that we're finally at a moment that we do have an ETF. And to your comment about just like you being surprised about me being here. Yeah, I mean, I understand that like a TradFi product might not feel like it can ever truly encapsulate the Bitcoin ethos, and I recognize a lot of elements there, but we also try our best. Yeah, there's like I'm not a person that wear like I have a beard, long hair. I don't wear a suit. Like I think there's a reason they don't send me to Wall Street events.
Right.
But
you're on dispatch.
Yeah, I'm on dispatch. Like like last night I was at BitDevs, Nashville crew.
What did
like,
you think of the BitDevs?
It was incredible. Yeah. It was really good. I mean, there's a lot of topics to talk about. Like, Stratum V2 was a big topic, like Bolt 12.
Have you ever been to a New York BitDevs?
I haven't.
The New York BitDevs is the creme de la creme.
Yeah.
So I grew up on New York BitDevs, and Jay runs the New York BitDevs.
Yeah.
So when we launched the park, we waited like 7 months before we launched a BitDevs here because I hold it in such high esteem that it was important that we at least attempted to do it as best as we possibly could. But Steve Myers and Matthew, who run it, and P wasn't there last night, but they do a really great job, and it's pretty cool to have a BitDevs in house.
Yeah, they did a great job.
But if you're ever in New York, you should try and make a New York BitDevs because Jay refuses to move to Nashville, so you have to go to New York if you want a proper Jay BitDevs. In the comments, I see ASDF. This is in person, but no video. Yeah, I actually, ironically enough, I like doing the in-person rips with no video, because I feel more comfortable with having the person here. And then if you, I kind of compensate for the remote episodes by giving you video. So it's like you either get the intimacy of an in-person rip without video, or you have the lack of intimacy of the remote rip, but then you have video. So that's a little bit of the thought process of the context of the no video. But me and Hong are chilling here at Bitcoin Park, and you're gonna have to trust us on that one. So where to start? I want to start with the string of Bitcoin ETFs not being approved. I when we first started chatting, I think it was like November of last year.
Yeah.
So it was like 3 months before the Bitcoin ETF, and it was because you were really interested in supporting open source contributors. And
yes,
it was actually quite refreshing because it wasn't us pitching. Like, to be frank, freaks, like I pitched every Bitcoin ETF to support open source contributors. I did not pitch Bitwise. Like Bitwise came to us, Hong specifically came to us and was like, we want to support open source contributors. We think this is how would be a great way to have it set up. But anyway, before we get to the supporting open source contributors part, I just want to crystallize here that in November when we were talking about it, I didn't think it was going to happen still. I mean, I was pretty sure it was at this point was going to be an eventuality.
Yeah.
But like a January launch date was still very much up in the air.
Totally. So when I reached out to you was basically the time that it really settled to us that it was happening, that the SEC was very serious.
Yeah.
Because it was after the lawsuit was decided in October.
Right.
And the SEC really sprinted from then to January. Like it was a crazy time for us because imagine us working on it for 6 years and like never really getting anything back from them.
Yeah.
And like you send something over the line and like wait like 5 months to get a response is like the kind of engagement that we had. And then overnight, because they were sprinting on a deadline, it was a short deadline for them as well. To go from like rejecting it for years to like approving it in 3 months, they had a lot to work to do on their end as well. Like every disclosure thing that they're not happy about, they want like mining risk to be described in this way and like the environmental risk to be described in that way, and like all these disclosure documents, even just going through the hundreds of pages of each of these issuers takes time. So we were like on a clock, like like every week they would like send us stuff, and then we would reply, and then it would like next week they would reply back, like a crazy response speed that really indicated that like, oh shit, like this is different, and they wouldn't be doing this if they weren't serious. And
But you didn't know it was going to be January.
But there was a deadline. The specific 19b4 process, that's jargon for just commodity ETFs. Spot commodity ETFs go through a specific regulatory pipeline, and it has a 240-day kind of timeline in which the SEC has to decide. So there was a end date that they needed to decide by, and if they were going to reject, they need to come up with.
But they could have delayed it again in January, right?
No. You can delay a few times along the way and get the full timeline in 240 days. But then after that, you have to decide. The SEC has to decide. So they've always.
Wasn't there like technicality there? It was like they could have delayed most of them, but they would have had to reject a couple. Was that it? Or
yeah. So the one that had been in the queue for the longest that dictated that timeline, I think it was Van Eck or something. But basically,
right. But they could have just fucked Van Eck, said reject Van Eck, and then delayed, and then
yeah. Okay. So just to maybe taking a step back, like why did the SEC get into this position?
Okay. Yeah.
It's because they've been treating Bitcoin in a specifically weird, discriminatory way, moving the goalpost many years, and like they just haven't been able to be consistent across administrations and across different chair people and across different like market regimes. Like they felt differently before FTX or after. Like, if the law should be applied in a consistent way, but given the political process that is kind of surrounding all of our regulatory decisions, it has just not been consistent. And it's not my view; it is actually the view of 3 judges in DC, in the Second Appeals Court, that are very well respected judges, took on this case. Ultimately, after a decade of the industry trying, Grayscale sued, and it went to court in the Second Appeals Court in DC. And the judges were looking at this, and they were like, "What the fuck is going on here?"
Right.
And everyone thinks that there's a meme around like, "Oh, BlackRock filed, and then suddenly it was all approved."
Yeah, I prescribe to that meme.
Yeah, the reality is something much closer to BlackRock has people. Obviously, their legal team is paying attention to things, and there was an oral.
They only filed when they knew it was going to be approved.
The oral hearing happened around May or so, where you had audio recording and you had a transcript. Right. And if you listen to that, the judges are very much upset. Like there's SEC lawyers trying to defend like how the futures product is okay, but the spot product is not, and like how they've made all these decisions over the years, and like trying to come up with the coherent narrative. And the judges are like, "What are you saying?
Yeah,
you're making no sense." And they're visibly very upset. And it's a pretty unanimous opinion. And anyone that listened to that could have known that probably Grayscale's winning this thing, even though it's unlikely.
But if you didn't listen to that, as soon as BlackRock filed, it was like, okay, BlackRock filed because they know they're going to get approved. So like you knew by the end of BlackRock's timeline, which I think was past January, but still, by the end of BlackRock's timeline, they were going to get approved.
BlackRock filed around like August or so. So it was before the final decision landed. Like the final landed in like October, but like they filed after the hearing. And well after they probably internally came to the view that the SEC is losing this thing. And if you have that view, then it's just a decision of like, do we want to be involved in this thing or not?
Right.
And
better to play the game than not.
Yeah.
They're in the game of making money.
They're in the game of making money, and they're like, we can definitely win this game. Like, why would we not play? And
yeah, I mean, to me, I guess my point is to me, as soon as BlackRock filed, I was like, okay, this thing is happening. It was just a matter of what the timing. I wasn't pretending to be a savant on the timing, but I think I even had tweets out there. Well, now my Twitter's deleted, but I had tweets out there that as soon as they filed, I was like, okay, like buy as much Bitcoin as you can afford because the ETF is coming and the suits are going to pump our bags. And
yeah. So I guess the reason that I came back to that context is to describe that ultimately the SEC was in a really tough position,
right?
Because they were not consistent in how they applied the laws, and then ultimately had a really embarrassing and high profile. This is not like a weird state. This is not like a weird judge. This is DC. This is the Second Appeals Court. There are 3 judges, unanimous decision that it was an arbitrary and capricious way in which the SEC handled all the filings over the years. So they didn't really have a way of going back from that and being like doing something willy-nilly again. So doing a rejection on a single filer with some cute narrative is just not something they can do. So at that point, they had to approve the next deadline. They couldn't do another rejection with any reason that wasn't a new reason, but there are no good new reasons to come up with. So then they ended up approving, and so then that's
Their
what,
hand was forced. Yeah.
yeah. And so that was what we were working with, and we kind of knew the January timeline, and ultimately later on they communicated that was what, like, the timeline that they were working with as well. And so I had a really hard time in my body, like, not thinking that we're being gaslit again.
Yeah.
But
because we've just been beaten down for so many years.
yes, if you go through like being hopeful and being rejected 6 years, then
You're a broken person.
yeah. Like, my body had a really hard time accepting that this time was different, but it really was different. And then that's when we reached out to you guys.
Yeah.
Like that's when I really, like, there's a lot of other people in the company working on like product structuring and like operations. They were like working on all the like details with the SEC. But something that I was thinking about is that, like, when I finally, it dawned on me, I was like trying to like accept that this was happening. Then I really, for the first time, like, thought about, like, okay, then what do we owe the network, the community?
Right.
Like, how can, it's both a great moment and a bit of a sad moment for the community, right? Like, because it is a custodial product,
Right.
and we're going to grow another user base, another owner base of custodial products. And yes, number might go up, but there is definitely kind of a sadness and a loss. And then we can talk about how we can make those things better, this like in-kind redemptions and stuff like that, which I also care a lot about. But anyways, there is kind of that element, and I was thinking a lot about, like, how can we, the best we can, make that better. And I don't think at that time anyone was really thinking that Bitwise would be a major player. I mean, it was like BlackRock,
No.
Fidelity, and then
You guys punched way above your weight.
it was like Franklin Templeton managed $1.5 trillion in dollars.
Yeah.
Like, Invesco manages over $1 trillion. Like, these are like the largest asset managers that all manage over like trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
And then there's like us. And so I don't think anyone was really thinking that we would be a serious player, but we had big ambitions. And in that world, I think we thought a lot about, like, how can we still create the most aligned and product, and something that gives back and has a relationship with the network and the community and the code base and everything. And
you
so
leaned into what you knew, which was being Bitcoiners.
yeah,
because that was the advantage you had over the TradFi suits that were just entering the game, essentially, right?
Yes. I mean, the ETF is a definitely like a mass product, and it's a very horizontal product in a way. Like, there is no special treatments amongst different like holders of the shares. It's a kind of a horizontal product in that way. So it's used by like a self-directed person that is putting in their retirement account, and also by like an endowment or like a financial advisor that has 50 clients that they are like all allocating to, etc. So it's just used by everyone. And a tricky thing that we do navigate is that we serve multitudes of constituents. And so, for example, like, if we're going to Wall Street and talking to like financial advisors and et cetera,
right,
we don't talk about the donation that much.
They don't really give a shit,
because like, for them, they're not used to seeing that on an ETF. An ETF is not supposed to like have like a worldview and like some sort of a public mission like that. So ETFs don't have donations associated to them, and from their perspective, like, if you have like excess revenue like that, why don't you just reduce the fees?
Right.
So I think to them it's like kind of not a feature, it's like a weird bug. So we just don't talk to it about them. But there definitely is also, so I'm not here saying that like we're just all like doing this out of altruism. We definitely have our self-interest as well.
Yeah, there's competition
between
there, especially at launch. Like, I think people don't remember how many ETFs were at launch. Was it 9 or 10?
9 new ones.
There was 9 ETFs plus GBTC, which was the juggernaut in the room. High fees, but tons of assets under management already. Came in as number one. There was intense competition, and there's only so many ways you can differentiate yourself from the competition. And you guys did it in 2 key ways. I mean, and we can go further into it, but open source contributors and transparency, I would say, are like and fees. I mean, you guys were incredibly competitive on the fees, and there was almost like a race to zero on that, and you guys came in the lowest. But I just want to capture like it was just such a crazy moment, And like the freaks don't realize, like my other show, Rabbit Hole Recap, I do it every week. Haven't skipped a week in 5.5 years, right? And like you came in November with this amazing idea for funding open source contributors. I did like 22 Rabbit Hole Recaps before I could talk to people about it.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
And that whole period was like such a crazy period in my life. I mean, it was probably a way crazier period in your life, but I remember like the day before, like the SEC bungled it and just like released a press release. And then like
Crazy.
Hong messaged me. He's like, you can't talk about it still. Like we have to pretend we didn't see it.
It's
And
wild.
like,
Yeah.
and then the next day they're like, oh, we've approved them. Like it was just the most crazy. It was the most insane fucking period. On the suits thing, you don't think there's an argument? I think there's like a pretty compelling argument that Bitcoin is different than other ETFs.
Yeah.
And that like if it's part of the security of the ETF is supporting open source contributors. I mean, I maybe it's not for every suit, but I know at like 1031, like we have a venture fund, we get institutional capital, like we have endowments, we have conversations with pension funds and stuff. And like when we take a portion of our management fees, actually very similar to Bitwise at a much smaller scale, and contribute to open source contributors. And when I talk to them about it, I always say, like at the end of the day, like if you're investing hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars and holding Bitcoin with it, like it's prudent to support the contributors that are maintaining the protocol that your wealth relies on. Like it's almost like it's a security thing to a degree, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I feel.
Right.
I mean, I think even the word like phrase donation is a little off. I think it is very much kind of a self investment.
Yeah.
Like if the U.S. spends on a defense security budget,
they don't call it
a donation. They don't say that we're donating to the military. It's like a self-interested investment into your own security. And I think that's a very similar mindset that I would have and how I would frame it to anyone that if I had a conversation like this to talk about.
Right.
But the reality is that a lot of people make allocations and use products without really having this type of conversation. Right. And like, yeah, I mean, Bitwise did a good job, and I think we really punched above our weight, but we're still 5% of the market.
Right.
Like, BlackRock is at like 15 billion, and Fidelity's at like 9, and then we're at like 2. I mean,
GBTC is at what?
GBTC is at maybe like 20 or something.
Okay.
Yeah. They're just Well, yeah. So
you're at 2. So you're fourth in terms of assets under management, right?
Yes.
Because ARK is in there too.
ARK is in there too. ARK is like 2.5. We're at 2 billion. And then after us, it's a cliff. Right. So it was basically like there were 4 spots.
You're in the top quartile.
Yeah.
Which is incredibly impressive.
Well, it's quartile in terms of ranks, but in terms of assets, like I think we have more inflows than everyone after us added together.
Oh yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So it really was a cliff. There really wasn't that. There wasn't 5 spots.
You didn't fall off the cliff.
Yeah, there was 4 spots, and we kind of like held on to it. Yeah, but the way why I say that to describe that is that like we have the lowest fee. We do all these things that we think are more Bitcoin aligned.
You're the only one on the cliff that didn't fall off the cliff that supports open source contributors.
Yeah, and yet still like 95% of the people don't care about that.
Right.
So that's the reality. I'm just describing that like there are suits that people like that care about this stuff. And I mean, even in like large Wall Street firms like banks and such, there's always Bitcoiners. That's also an incredible thing about this is that like it is really a movement. So like there are like secret people that are really about the movement in any organization almost.
Yeah, that's what we see when we work with institutions. It's like just because the institution isn't Bitcoin focused doesn't mean someone on their investment committee isn't.
Exactly.
Bitcoin.
Exactly. So there are definitely people that do love the donation aspect of those things as well. Right. But I'm just describing that in a general sense. Most people aren't
they
really
like the low fees the most.
Yeah.
Everyone likes low fees.
So I mean, I think one of the things that we did about the fees is that we were just very we accepted the reality earlier than others, I think.
Yeah.
That it was going to be competitive. Like whatever you wanted it to be was not going to be the reality. Like your hopes doesn't dictate reality.
Right.
The reality is that like 9 firms of the largest are like launching commodity products. Like they're roughly the same thing.
Right.
So then it was just going to be a fee competition. And so we just went down earlier. So we ended up at our 20 basis points, so 0.2%. Right. Fidelity and BlackRock are at 25 basis points, so 0.25,
Right.
and then the rest.
And
kind of,
ARK did the meme number, right?
you know,
They were
yeah,
at
yeah, 20
21.
bips. Yeah. But yeah, I think we ended up roughly, we're not that much lower than everyone else, but because we committed to being low early, because that we knew that was going to end up, leading up to it, at any point in time, people like kept adjusting fees for 3 days in a row. But in any days, if you wrote an article about who had the lowest fee, then it was
Right.
us. So I think that was really helpful in like,
You're like always the lowest.
yeah. And everyone ended up being where we were, so it didn't really matter that much in the grand scheme of things. It's not like we lost a lot of revenue over that decision, but we just accepted that earlier than others, so that we got credit. We got a disproportionate amount of credit for being the lowest, when in reality we have similar fees.
Yeah, I mean, I liked how aggressive you guys were with it. Like, you're obviously like in it to you were prioritizing, and you were in it to win it. And
we're in it to win it. We're in it to, like, we weren't shy. We did a TV ad before, like,
you were very proud of that TV ad.
Yeah.
It was fine.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like,
It was with, by the way, freaks, if you haven't seen it, it was with the most interesting man in the world, the Dos Equis guy.
Yeah. And I think we were just like leaving it out in the field,
right?
And we had to. I mean, I think the record shows that like everything that we did combined ended up with us holding on to 5% market share, and it's a great place to be, because now we have a serious enough product that we can go out and sell. Like, if we had a $100 million product, then it's not like, no amount of
doesn't matter,
like fees, donations,
you're irrelevant.
Proof of reserves, like how much you spend on marketing and sales. Just, at that point, you don't have a product that has enough liquidity,
right,
to anyone else to further decide. They can't, in their good conscience.
It's just like a slow spiral to death.
Yeah. But $2 billion product is a viable product.
Yeah.
Like, nobody, like,
$2 billion it's sizable.
Yeah. And that's great. I mean, I think I also feel proud about like the then things that we can really push for with that amount of like seriousness. If we publish our addresses and do proof of reserves, like, nobody can be like, they're just fly by the night, they don't take seriously, it's not a real product. Like, so like, you can't, like, real serious people can't do proof of reserves. Like, you can't say that when there's like a $2 billion product out there. And also, like, you know, if there's something that we're not happy about, like our custodian, let's say, like, there were a lot when we published our addresses, people were upset about the fact that it was like not even a SegWit address and stuff. But like, we can go back and really have a serious conversation about Coinbase. Like, what the fuck, guys? Like, it really is a problem that you are putting us into this position,
right?
And this is like not okay. And they take us seriously because, like, again, we're a big client. So there's some things that I really feel we've been able to like push in a way that is material, because we got to, like it again. Of course, I would have been great if we were in BlackRock's position, but I think we have enough for it to be like powerful, and we also am excited to grow it from here.
Yeah, I mean, you should be proud, and that's coming from the guy who says "fuck the suits" in all caps. Like, you should be proud. So let's talk about. We'll get to Coinbase custody and transparency and that stuff. Let's talk about how you did your open source contributions. I thought it was quite clever. It was not our idea. It was Hong's idea. Like, he came with this idea of 10% of profits for 10 years, nice long-term reoccurring aligned commitment, where if they make more money, open source contributors get more money, and then split between 3 organizations. It wasn't just OpenSats, it was HRF, Brink, and OpenSats. And since you brought that to me, that has been essentially the model that I've tried to pitch as many, because I don't want OpenSats to be, like, I have enough pressure on me. I say to everyone I think OpenSats is, you know, one of the best nonprofits in the world. I think we have plenty of places we can improve, but I think we're more ethical, more transparent, more efficient than 99% of the nonprofits that operate in the world. But anyone who gives me a critique, I would love for them to launch their own. Like, I think as the more people working on this problem, the better, because there's no easy solutions here. So I've actually used your model in pitches since then. I mean, they haven't been quite successful. Like, it's a long grind.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
let's talk about that model a little bit, because I think it's quite compelling.
Yes. So, as we were talking about a moment ago, I think around like November or so,
Right.
it's like a month after the court case, like three months after BlackRock filed. I think like that, at that point we really knew this was happening, and I was thinking about it, and so once I really felt that like we really need to figure out a donation to devs here, and I think it's like I mean, because there is a unique opportunity here where like this is a custodial product,
Right.
pooled Bitcoin together. We take fees,
Right.
so it's much easier for us to then take a portion of those fees and make that donation.
Right. It's inherently monetized.
Yeah, it's inherently monetized, and it's also inherently monetized in a transparent way because it's a public product. Like, I mean, if another business were doing it, then they would be kind of disclosing their revenue details, and that can be a little bit uncomfortable.
Right.
But this product is already a public product. The fees are transparent. The AUM is transparent.
Because it's an ETF, it has to be.
Yeah. So in some ways, it's already taking, again, it's inherently monetized, inherently transparent. And so we weren't really like, it was a really great vehicle. And also it's really well aligned in terms of like, let's say if it's an exchange, then your revenue is tied to trading volume, so it can be more volatile. But our revenue is just with along the AUM. So if this whole thing becomes more valuable, then we make more money. So it's, in a way, like it's, if we tie it to a recurring model, then it can be a more sticky and kind of stabilizing force compared to, I think, donations generally are a little bit even like further cyclical than the market cycle, because people feel even further squeezed when the market is down than just the price level.
No one donates when Bitcoin price is down.
Exactly. And so we could, our revenue would go down, but it wouldn't go down to zero. And I think that was also an opportunity. So there was a lot of ways in which it was a good opportunity. But then when I was thinking about actually implementing it, there was a fair amount of like questions.
Right.
How do we do it in a way that people don't feel threatened by TradFi firm like us showing up and saying, we're donating that.
We're going to buy your developers.
Yeah. I mean, even if we have good intentions,
the suits are here to bribe our developers.
Yeah. Good intentions are not enough. Like Bitcoin in itself has that ethos as well. It should be the design of the incentives, or like the model itself should be should embed as much as possible kind of a clarity about what's possible and what's not. And so like us making a donation to an individual dev and just saying that we're not pressuring them, that's just not great for people to believe.
No one's going to believe you.
Yeah, no one's going to believe us. And so it needed to be no strings attached, but it also had to go through other entities. It couldn't be direct. And then when I thought about like it being one nonprofit, that also comes with problems. What if we become incredibly successful? I mean, we want to be incredibly successful. Then let's say we like dominate the ETF market. Then suddenly one organization gets like a disproportionate amount of the open source funding. That also can create problems. And yeah, so then it had to be multiple. And that's kind of like where that was the kind of the idea maze that I went through of thinking, and then okay, like deciding that set was a little bit of a judgment call.
Right.
I went out and talked to everyone that I respected in the space. Like I talked to like Steve Lee, I talked to Adam Jonas, and a few others that were very deep in the work of it all, and like what types of organizations that they felt were doing the best work. And thankfully, it was a pretty easy decision. Everyone kind of coalesced to OpenSats and Brink and HRF. And those are also the three entities that had the kind of cleanest, like clear nonprofits mission. And
we made it very easy for you.
Yeah. It was like the options were very clear that was like the best set, and also it had the most kind of well set up kind of governance structure around that as well. Because we don't want there to be trouble there. So it just ended up being that was the right set and the easiest set to go with. And 3 felt like a good number, and like ultimately 10% of the net profits of that product was also just a number, but 10 felt like the right number. And
it's a big number.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, but
I mean, I wanted the meme number of 21%, but I'm not gonna complain.
Yeah. So that's how we ended up with it. Yeah.
I will say, as someone who is intimately involved with raising money for OpenSats, I'm very grateful for the long-term commitment, because I make no money from OpenSats, and this idea that I have to just constantly be calling people and texting people and circling back to try and get new commitments, the reoccurring model is a breath of fresh air. 10 years is like 100 years in Bitcoin terms. So I have like a century. I have a century commitment. It is a massive departure from the usual like one-off donations. So I appreciate that. I'm curious, what do you say to the critics that say, well, 10% of profits right now like isn't that much?
I think we have really big ambitions for the product.
Yeah.
I think something that so let's just kind of do the rough math. I think like we have a $2 billion product right now. 20 basis points means that we have $4 million in annual revenue from that product now.
Right.
And let's say it has a 50% profit margin.
Okay.
So then 2 million in kind of like profits from the product, and 10% of that would be 200K.
Right.
Not a game-changing amount of money. I recognize that. But if that 10x is, if that 100x is, then it can be a meaningful amount. And it can like, and also, I'm not here saying that we're solving open source funding as a problem.
You did it, Hong. You solved it.
Like, I'm saying that we want to
mission accomplished.
We want to pull our weight.
Yeah.
And it is kind of well incentive aligned if we have more success. Like, but maybe to just paint a picture a little bit about like how it could be a bigger product is. So GLD, which is the first gold ETF in the US, launched in 2004.
Yeah.
And that in the first 3 days or a week gathered about $1 billion in assets.
Right.
That was the most successful, wildly like historic launch, like $1 billion in 3 days. Yeah. Crazy. And then the next 3 months maybe gathered about another $500 million or so, and like $1.5 billion. And then it kind of died out there. And then people thought that it was an event that came and passed because like launched first few days, billion, and then like a little bit more trickled in, and then like it's quiet now.
Right.
The reality of what happened after that is that like the next year in 2005, maybe about another 2 billion came in. Next year, I think about like 3.5, 5, and then there was a $10 billion year. Ultimately, there were positive inflows that were growing and kind of like sustaining in those levels for another 8 years after that. And the launch year was an insignificant moment in the grand scheme of things. And I think that is also likely what we will see with Bitcoin ETFs as well. We had a historic time. We launched in the first month.
Right.
Outside of GBT's flows, we had maybe a 2 or 3 billion, and then in like next 3 months, we had like 10 billion or so. So like we had an incredibly successful debut. I mean, if you think about it as kind of like maybe like an IPO moment, like it was a successful IPO.
It beat all expectations.
Yeah, it beat all expectations, but I think there's a way in which
like it insanely beat all expectations.
Yeah, it insanely beat all. But
there was people that saying it was a non-event. It was a sell the news event.
Yeah. And I think those people
were wrong.
Yeah, were wrong and regretted it. And I think the market priced that in as like the market dipped because people thought that it was the sell the event was over. Yeah. And after the first month, it seemed like things were quieting down. And then on month 2 and 3, another $10 billion of net flow showed up, and then everyone.
And now we're at $65,000.
Yeah. So like price went up like 50%, and the market has kind of like adjusted to that new reality now. But what I'm trying to paint a picture here a little bit is that like there's a way in which crypto Twitter or traders kind of like to think about the ETF moment as like an event, like and the market event,
a singular event,
and it came and went. But in reality, it's much closer to like a state change.
Right.
It's much more closer
to
a
paradigm.
A company going public. Like it's not that the company itself changed. Like why you would invest in the company, what is the value or the moat of the company, why it exists didn't change. But when a company goes public, it just goes from having private market liquidity to public market liquidity. The amount of market participants and the dollars that can really easily engage with that company's stock just changes, and it changes forever. It doesn't never, unless it delists.
Right.
It doesn't. It just maintains that, and I think that's closer to what we have here. But that state change is now a new world in terms of just like kind of public market liquidity, but saturating the opportunity set is just going to take some years. And to paint a picture a little bit there, like most of the dollars,
Takes time.
yeah, like we think about like the like wirehouses, like large banks like Morgan Stanley or UBS or Wells Fargo, these firms. A financial advisor that's managing money for like their clients can't really put a Bitcoin ETF into their portfolios yet.
It's considered high risk. It's new.
It's just not approved for that.
Yeah.
Currently it's allowed if the client asks, but there is no discretionary allocation that's allowed. It's just not allowed by the Home Office, and they're going through due diligence. And due diligence for ETFs, new ETFs usually take like 6 to 12 months. I think everyone is racing towards trying to do a little bit earlier
because they're all competing too.
Yeah, they're all competing, and they're also trying to like meet their client needs.
Right.
They have customers that want it, but it's still, they're like the first firms are like coming out of the woodwork there, really, like, because we're now 4 months in, 5 months. It's just like the first set of firms are starting to come out of the tunnel, and so really in terms of like actually Bitcoin ETFs taking in the money that was like structurally unable, like the public market liquidity that really wasn't able to interact with it. We got like a taste of it, like the $12 billion that showed up in the first 3 months was a taste of that.
A small
but
taste.
Really, that takes time.
It's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, and even after they have discretionary ability to allocate, so right now it's just not allowed. Once it gets allowed, I mean, if you think of even how like the retail played out, it played out over time. Like people put in a little bit amount, and then they lose that money, or like they go through the volatility, and then they realize that they should have like just held on to it, and then they put in a little bit more.
Stack sets.
Yeah, and they learn about Bitcoin, and then they learn about like Austrian economics. It just takes time. So I think like right now the gates haven't even really opened for them, and it will open, and then they will all kind of like find their ways in, and that's why a product like GLD just had incrementally higher flows for years that ultimately like paled the first launch year. Launch year again was like $1 billion, and like 4 or 5 years later, a single year brought in like 10. So I think that's the dynamic that we're at play, and we're just so early. Yes, that's why we're bullish and why we're like really committed and excited about this part of the journey, because now that Bitcoin is like a little sideways, a little bit died down, all the other firms like BlackRock still ultimately is a small product for them, or like Fidelity, or they all have other asset classes that are much bigger.
It's the baby.
We're focused on only one thing. Like we don't have another $2 billion product out there, and so I think this is kind of the part that we feel excited about.
You're not trying to show me a copper ETF, you know?
Yeah. I'm not going to be talking about like Chinese equities or fixed income or something like that tomorrow. And so yeah. And anyways, I think basically the message is that like the category is actually much bigger than what it seems now. And it can grow into something much bigger, not just from prices going up, but also just from saturating the public market opportunity. And I think if we do that well, Bitcoin, our ETF could be a much bigger product, and hopefully donate a lot more to devs as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think like on the institution side, like you have institution level time that takes. Family offices, as you talked about. I mean, family offices are a big part of the American economy that people should not discount. That's like money managers of rich families. But even on like the individual level, I mean, we saw so many stories. I still hear stories of like people going to like their broker at UBS or their broker at Morgan Stanley or whatnot and be like, I want to buy the ETF. And they just send them through so many hoops if they even let them buy one of the ETFs to begin with.
Yeah.
And these things take time. So like it really is definitely a paradigm shifting moment. And my answer is quite simple when people give me that critique. My answer is like, look, at the end of the day, Bitwise put their balls on the table. They directly aligned it with how much money they're making. So if you have any critique on no matter how much money they're making, it's 10% of it, which is a sizable portion. So that's huge. The second thing is I say the deal we made is that 5 to 10 year the years 5 through 10 are where it's going to be most significant from an absolute terms, and I won't have to call you back at that point. You've already committed to it, which is huge. And then third of all, you've told everyone else on the cliff why aren't you doing what we're doing? Like, why is GBTC not supporting open source developers? Why is BlackRock not? Why is Fidelity not? Why is ARK not? And they've noticed, like they have definitely noticed. And I do not think, I think it's very hard to overstate what you guys have done. And most people are understating it. I remember Hong messaged me like a week before the ETFs approved, and he's like, we have no idea if they're going to get approved or not. Like, I have no insider information. But if we do get approved on the date that everyone expects us to get approved, like, I would love to have you on a Twitter Spaces. Is that out of the question because it's the demon app? Because you knew I didn't like Twitter. And I was like, yeah, sure. I'll go on a Twitter Spaces right before I deleted my account. And our Twitter Spaces had like 150 people in it. Like, we did not have that many. There was the big, some of the other ETFs had massive Twitter Spaces, and they had like a full celebrity group of influencers, like all on stage or whatnot. And we're just talking about supporting open source contributors. And I think like a lot of people faded it. And the fact that you guys had the conviction and the aggressiveness to actually make it fucking happen is why we're here today, but is also like why it's a significant thing. And I think it's something that like goes down in history books. Like, I think it's like it actually does. It will make the difference as time goes on, and people will look back and be like, holy shit, like Bitwise really did lead the charge there. I've had so many private conversations where people are like, that Bitwise news was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. And I really appreciate you, Hong, for leading the charge there, and thank you.
Wow. Thanks for saying that. I think I'm feeling a little emotional. But I really do. Yeah, I think there is a way in which it was not, like, in retrospect, now that Bitwise has had some success, I think it's easy to say that, like, oh yeah, it was a good business move, blah, blah, blah. But I think, and now we're even having a conversation about like, why are these other players not doing it? And that is a conversation to be had.
Yeah.
It's a conversation to be had because an alternative exists. And I think there is, So I appreciate you kind of recognizing that required some amount of conviction. I mean, I think ultimately it really was. I mean, I did think about the business aspects of it as well, but also it was just a thing that I felt, and ultimately convinced our leadership to also feel, that it was just like the right thing. We're ultimately Bitcoiners.
Yeah.
Like, and this is something.
The business rides or dies on Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin fails, you guys are fucked.
Yeah, and also, I mean, even beyond the business, and I think this is like, Bitcoin is just a very important thing for the world.
Right. That's why most of us are here.
Yeah, like the idea of like a user controlled money, and I think it's just a radical idea that is very important to, and it just doesn't have like just obviously is going to work out, obviously is going to win. I think there's a way in which there's sometimes I feel like a bit of a complacency in people.
Yeah.
I mean, because I also,
there's a lot of complacency, huh?
I mean, I also get it as well. Like there's so much like bad faith critiques that I think when we talk about it in public, I don't like giving, like showing weakness. Like,
the best Bitcoin critics are Bitcoiners.
Yeah. So like when I'm talking about it publicly with people that are like putting forth like bad faith arguments against it, then of course I'm like, yeah, Bitcoin is rock solid. Like that's all like bad argument. Well, like I would do that. I would kind of do the micro sailor.
Right.
But in with Bitcoiners, I think we can recognize that like it's just not a given that this thing is going to be allowed to exist and work and be secured, and like, and people think about like consensus stuff all the time as like the main thing to think about and maintain, but like that's a small part of what the open source devs do. I mean, ultimately it's a network, and like the mempools are always having different types of issues to navigate, and the issues change over time. Like it's a live freaking network, and all sorts of things that needs to be maintained, and like the yeah. So, and it's just not obvious to me that we can be complacent in like supporting our devs and like just expect this thing to work out.
Someone else will do it. All right.
Yeah. So I think that is part of that as well, that I wanted it as a Bitcoiner. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I believe we will do this thing, but I believe we will do it because people stand the fuck up and make it happen. And we haven't won yet, and we haven't made it happen yet. And until then, people have to do things, and they have to do the hard things. And complacency fucking kills. And I don't want, I keep going back to the meme of just mission accomplished George Bush on the aircraft carrier. There's a lot of Bitcoiners that embody that meme. Don't be one of those Bitcoiners.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that like all the things that we, like public key cryptography being a thing that is that we enjoy as like a right that we have,
right,
is not a thing that was given to us. We fought for that,
right,
and
continue to,
and yeah, it's just going to be something that we have to continue to fight for. I mean, just one thing about the years 5 to 10 point. We don't have intentions of pulling it on year 11. At least that's how we think about it. We gave the 10-year number as a minimum, because saying that it's indefinite sounds in some ways like a weaker commitment, and making a concrete number.
Well, we could do 21 years if you don't want to do indefinite.
I mean, what I'm saying is, I don't think we're like secretly looking to
year 11. You're gonna fuck us, right?
I mean, if we have the success that we hope to have, then I think we'd be happy to continue to donate 10%.
Well, I hope my successor at OpenSats calls you up year 11, because
and
if I'm still involved, I just I'm exhausted, freaks. I'm exhausted. So, but I know I definitely didn't mean it in that respect.
Yeah. I mean,
to me, like 10 years is a nice round number. We did 10%.
Yeah,
nice round number. 10 years, nice round number.
Just
we can circle
for
back.
the audience, and to some extent, like of course, it's all you have to trust our intentions to some extent, that we will continue to, and like that is like it's just me saying that. But also, I think you can attest to, Matt, the fact that like we came to you with this. It like I'm not.
No, it was the single easiest OpenSats deal I've ever done.
Yeah, and maybe that kind of shows a little bit of the proof of work of like that it was something that we decided to do, and we thought, and so part of Anyways,
I appreciate you. Yeah, you're great. But yeah, years 5 to 10, man. That's we're gonna
great.
The open source contributors are gonna get a lot of money those years, I think.
And we'll have bigger problems then.
Let's talk about. So we talked about the from my angle, the two big things that you guys, Nanya Business just rated us, so he brought his audience over here. Thank you, Nanya. Appreciate you. Ride or Die Freak, good internet friend. I don't think I've ever met you in person. One day, maybe. That'd be great. Also, I wanted to say to KNI Calvario, I appreciate you. Don't let the people in the chat bully you. Say whatever you want to say. Our chat is unmoderated, and they can't censor you even if they want to censor you. As always, freaks, you can join us in the live chat at citadeldispatch.com/stream. The Ride or Die freaks that join the live chat make this really special. I met Nanya at Bit Block Boom in Dallas. Great event. I can't place you. I apologize, but I appreciate you. I want to talk about. To me, there's two big things, and I think there's a strong argument that a lot of us, like, I mean, me personally, I'm probably as anti-ETF as they come. Self-custody all the way, use your own node. I'm like, don't trust third parties. But at the end of the day, like, I have a lot of friends and family that the Bitcoin ETFs opened up the possibility for them to actually hold Bitcoin for the first time, or hold a Bitcoin IOU for the first time. And I always just recommend them BitB, right? Like, I recommend them your product because I think it's most aligned with ethos, and I think just from the open source contribution side is fucking massive. And I tell them that's why. And I think there's a strong argument, and this is why, me personally, like, I always focus on the ride or dies. Like, the ride or dies are the people that go out there and then they talk to 100 people, 1,000 people, and you don't know who those 100 to 1,000 people are. They could be movers or shakers or wherever they are, and they get shit done. But the transparency is really cool. I think it's really cool what you guys have done in terms of proof of reserves, in terms of Hoseki. I think we should talk about that a little bit. So, like, what was your thought process on proof of reserves and making your addresses public? I mean, I don't think there's not a single ETF that has done it besides you guys, right? So on the open source side, Van Eck, which is a smaller ETF, much smaller ETF, they give 5% of their profits to Brink. Besides Bitwise and Van Eck, nobody else is giving to open source contributors. And then you guys are the only ones who have actually made your addresses public and done proof of reserves. And you went even farther with Hoseki in terms of like proving ownership of those addresses. How do you think about that?
Yeah. Yes, that one is another one that I would hope the other ETFs would also consider. I mean, it's been some time now, so I think it's okay. How did we think about that? I mean, ultimately, again, I'm a Bitcoiner and have just been frustrated with all the shit over the years of custodial products not having transparency, and then ultimately them growing to become kind of systemically large, and then blowing up, and kind of the community having to then clean up the mess and kind of like move on from that. And when we got to a certain size, I think we were either 1 billion or 2 billion. I think like month 2 we were 2, but like it felt like now we were sitting on an amount of Bitcoin that is a pretty meaningful amount of Bitcoin. And like we should do it is kind of there's no like argument not
You
to.
kind of ninja launched it.
What?
You kind of like just woke up one morning and just like tweeted out your addresses, huh?
I mean, it was considered. I mean, we did have to. I mean, the reason that we couldn't do it like immediately after day one or something, because we didn't fully think it through at that time. And then once we started thinking it through, it still took some time with like legal and compliance, and like
Yeah.
everyone still had like we had to make sure that it was buttoned up. But we're we don't take like years with these things. So like a month or two was enough for us to get clarity there. And yeah, and I think that's another area where I feel excited that we can kind of be an example, because like no one can say that it's not doable.
Right, you did it.
Yeah. And
You did the thing.
we definitely take like legal compliance, regulatory stuff very seriously. We worked with SEC for 6 years on this product. Like, so I think nobody can say that like it's not allowed or like it's not doable. And like another few things is just like I was also a little post-launch feeling a little bit like people were treating it a little bit too much like gold, or like that type of narrative. Like I like the digital gold narrative as an investment narrative, but when people go too far in thinking that that's literally what it is, then they don't understand that they're dealing with a radically different thing here.
Right.
Like gold cannot do proof of reserves.
Yeah.
Like gold, you cannot securely custody, but also publicly verify or maintain public transparency about your holdings.
It's one of the benefits of Bitcoin.
Absolutely.
That someone around the world can trustlessly verify ownership without without giving them custody.
Exactly. Like public auditability is like one of the really big strengths of Bitcoin as an asset and network and idea. And there's a way in which
like
that,
the GLD people were like actually they took pictures like in the gold vault.
Yeah,
which proves nothing really.
Which proves nothing. But that's just the best they can do.
But just to show like what a difference there is between Bitcoin and gold. Right?
Exactly. Like GLD launched, gold bugs were like upset about GLD because like how do you know paper gold? And then like they did like a media tour of like bringing some people inside to the vault and like taking pictures.
They took selfies inside the vault, legit.
Yeah, and like that's supposed to prove a point.
Look at all this gold.
Yeah. But there's a way in which we're kind of treating Bitcoin in the same way, and that frustrates me a little bit. Or like it's not like the full and to some extent, like showing versus telling is always more effective.
It's so much more effective.
Yeah. Like, we can talk about like, oh, there's a public key and there's a net blockchain.
Be the change you want to see in the world. Fucking do it. Do the thing.
Yeah, but like when you show the address to people, like a set of addresses to people, and like, look, it's here. It doesn't mean that the custody is not safe. That's how public key cryptography works, and that's how Bitcoin works. And like you can have public auditability without it being any more at risk at loss, and like don't have anyone tell you otherwise. And even a regulated product like us can do it. Like when you show it to people, then I think people have to go through some cognitive dissonance in like really trying to think through what is different here, and come to realize that like gold and Bitcoin it's nowhere near the same thing. And especially also like when people, and it's a really important part, because when people think about things like, let's say, free banking at the gold era and Bitcoin era, they kind of like talk about it as if it has the same set of risks. Right. That is just not true. Because you can have the type of public transparency and accountability while having custodial services that's just not possible with gold and possible with Bitcoin. And so anyways, like I just wanted, it wasn't like I one day woke up and I was like, we're shipping this.
It kind of felt like that.
It kind of did. Post-launch, I think there was a way in which it was very successful, but it was successful in a way that kind of too much of it was kind of like removed, and wanted to push to surface more of like Bitcoin-ness to the product, and then really started pushing our legal and compliance team and like kind of like, or like, I mean, to give them a ton of credit. We didn't build a firm of like people that don't also have this ethos. They are also Bitcoiners. So they are trying to make this work in a way that we still don't get into trouble. And so they're trying to dot their I's and cross their T's. And like, but they did the work, and then we came out feeling that there's no problem here. And then we move forward with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the coolest parts about Bitcoin companies is we've never had this before, which is like I like to call it like almost like a shared equity, right? Like 1031 has 36 portfolio companies. Most of those companies own Bitcoin. Most of the employees own Bitcoin. Most of the people involved in those companies are Bitcoiners. And so if one company does things that are successful, it usually benefits everybody else, which is something that we've just never seen. It just has never existed. Which is it's like a crazy thing to just like wrap your head around. On the transparency side, on the proof of reserve side, I know it wasn't you woke up one morning and just decided to tweet out your addresses, because I had been talking to you about it for a while before you did. I just want to say to anyone who's listening that's a Bitcoin Twitter influencer, just you can go fuck yourself. Like in the whole, and I know you're more reserved, you're more deliberate in your. I'm actually pretty deliberate in my comments. People don't give me enough credit for that. But Bitwise comes out. It's like, here's our addresses. And Bitcoin Twitter was just like overwhelmingly negative. They were just like, oh, like, what is not native SegWit? It's, like, what are you doing here? Like, look how antiquated they are. The only ETF to actually post addresses and do some semblance of proof reserves, which you guys have gone even further since then with Hoseki, in terms of actually verifying ownership of those addresses. I mean, like, Craig Wright as a perfect example of someone who's posts addresses that he doesn't control, was just really disappointing. Like, get your priorities in order. And you don't have to comment on that. I think the SegWit stuff, I think it's cool that you used your position as a big client at Coinbase to push them to move to the new address type. Was cool. Unnecessary, but cool. My bigger question, and I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here. My bigger question is, I think the bigger concern for a lot of people is that almost everyone is at Coinbase except for Fidelity. I forget who. One of them is at Gemini, which might be worse. I mean, the Winklevoss twins, they don't have like the best record. I think they still owe people $1 billion from Gemini Earn, thanks to Barry Silbert. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on being solely reliant on Coinbase custody? If you want to talk about centralized points of failure, like that is I could give two shits if it's in a legacy address versus a SegWit address.
Totally. I see that. What I would say is that I imagine that the future is likely multi-custodian, and that transition will happen in not too long of a timeline. Let's say like in 12 months from now, if it was still this concentrated with Coinbase custody, I would likely be surprised.
So you're saying a situation where like ETFs are holding 30% in one custodian, 30% in another, 38% in another.
So a single
like compartmentalized, like a poor man's multi-sig.
Yes. An ETF as a vehicle can definitely have multiple custodians.
Okay.
That's not a thing that is precluded.
Right.
We don't have any product that does that yet.
Okay.
But it's definitely
none of the ETFs do that right now, right?
Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But none that is
quote them on it, freaks.
That is a large product.
Okay.
But we're definitely exploring it, and I think there's good reason to imagine that is likely where the space is going, for many reasons related to centralization that you're talking about. It's also just a pretty competitive market, so that I think also just generates natural amount of some diversity. Maybe some context is helpful. I think this is incredibly
give us context.
Yeah, incredibly fair critique, and I would own up to anyone saying that. But a little bit of context about like why we had this amount of like everyone just had the same choice, and why that happened is because we talked a little bit at the beginning of this episode about it suddenly going from, like in October, November, going from like no word from the SEC to like they're giving us comments every week, and we're like racing towards a January deadline. And in that process, your worst nightmare is that like you're caught up in like replying about some specific issue, and then everyone else moves on from that, and then like you don't get the day one launch. Like
8 others go, and then you're stuck for 3 months. You're dead. You're dead in the water if that happens.
Even a single day, you're dead in the water. Like it just so much of it happens on the launch moment. So much of the game plays out in the launch moment.
Right.
That even if you are like a week later, then it's over. So I think everyone had that fear, and everyone was just like trying to have the least amount of back and forth with the SEC as possible. Like just want the most non-controversial selections on every dimension.
Right.
So if you go at it from that perspective, then Coinbase was a public company that SEC had
the Goldman Sachs of crypto.
I mean, it's a company that the SEC knows, and also that BlackRock chose. It was just a consensus pick, and you don't want to be talking about multiple custodians. You don't want to be talking. You don't want to be the one that is like bringing.
You're not bringing the artisan custodian play.
None of that. I think people. I mean, rightfully don't, but like it was just a crazy time.
Yep.
And we were like racing towards. They were racing. We were racing. And you just did not want to raise another question.
Don't rock the boat.
Yeah. Because this is the thing that we were waiting. Look, after we get it out, then everything, we can talk about multiple custodians.
Yeah.
Like we do everything, but like until another issue that was kind of this way was I think this crypto Twitter caught on a little bit about, but like in-kind contribution, in-kind creates and redeems. Like you can't put Bitcoin in and get Bitcoin out of this product.
Yeah.
That's not an ETF structural, like legal. I mean, all gold ETFs has in-kind and creates like all commodity products.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was an arbitrary thing that the SEC was drawing a line about, like with Bitcoin ETFs, at least for now.
Oh, really? So in-kind is in play.
In-kind is definitely in play.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't require like an SEC rule change or something like that.
No, it's just them changing their opinion about it. Like there's these like weird things that the SEC has positioned about Bitcoin specifically. Right. Like for example, SAB 121 is another one of this. I think it's gotten a little bit of attention on Twitter this week. SAB 121 is like special accounting bulletin board item or something 121, where the SEC just put out just specifically targeting Bitcoin guidance around the fact that if a regulated entity like a bank wanted to custody Bitcoin for their customers, then they have to also have one-to-one reserves of dollars.
Fucking insane.
So if you're custodying $100 million of Bitcoin for clients, then you have to take on the capital cost of just holding another $100 million of dollars treasury.
In addition to the 100 million Bitcoin you hold already.
Yeah. So it just makes it not viable for any regulated entity. I mean, of course, we want more self-custody and all that, but we also just want, like, it's a permissionless network and asset. Like if regulated entities want to custody it for their clients, they should be able to do that as well. But the SEC is saying, no, we have a specific accounting thing because we think it's risky. And
especially since with dollars, they're doing fractional reserve banking. So they're not even holding one-to-one dollars. And if they hold one-to-one Bitcoin, it still doesn't qualify because they need to hold an additional
it's really,
level of dollars. It's
really
fucking insane.
It's really quite absurd. And it went to, I think the House voted on it last week. Okay. And it actually was a bipartisan, like that. It was a weird, unlawful, or like this was not, it's not right. And then it passed, and it's now I think going up to the Senate. But like there are these arbitrary things that is just not a legal constraint, not like what the spirit of the law says, or like there's a specific reason that this shouldn't be allowed, but more so just guidance level decisions by the SEC that that really is mostly targeting Bitcoin in some ways. And in-kind was just another one of those things. And the SEC was pretty clear that like if you want to be out on the first batch, you just have to.
I mean, so you brought it up, Hong. I think so I mean, that's the argument I make to most people behind the scenes about Coinbase is like no one wanted to rock the boat. They just wanted to get approved. They needed to be there for launch. Coinbase was the easy answer. Public company, $60 billion market cap. Ex-Goldman Sachs founders selling surveillance software to the U.S. government and other governments. It was the easy answer. And these things will evolve over time. And the beauty of capitalism when it's not captured by government is that there's competition and people will improve the products.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, like, what is the risk? The risk is that funds are lost, and that is a central point of failure. And that is a risk that any ETF operator
cares about.
Yeah, obviously, because it destroys your business. So the incentives make sense. But I want to ask you, you brought up this in-kind redemption. I think we have some visitors. Yeah. He's just going to listen in. It's rare that you get to be here for an in-person dispatch. So I respect anyone who wants to enjoy it in person. Guys, if you come to Bitcoin Park, you can sit on the couch and listen to Dispatch in person and get to enjoy it. So consider coming down to Nashville. We're having a fun time down here. In-kind redemptions, Hong. I think it's incredibly predatory to not have in-kind redemptions. Because I think GBTC has proven that if Bitcoin does its thing and it goes up, I know you agree with me, but incentives are important, right? So I want to talk about this a little bit because you brought it up, and you can tell me like I don't want to discuss it. You're always welcome to do that. I told you beforehand, and you haven't done it yet, but you're welcome to. because GBTC proved that if you have Bitcoin appreciation that increases the way we've seen it to do it historically, and you don't have in-kind redemptions, then the only way for them to leave the lobster trap is to take cap gains. So they will accept a higher fee. So if you don't have in-kind redemptions, you can actually increase the fee over time. So it's actually the opposite of what you usually see in most industries, where fees compress to zero and go down and get more competitive. Fees can actually go up if you don't have in-kind redemptions. Do you think that there's actually like a world where we start where some ETFs like actually move to in-kind, where you don't have, like, you can't trap your customers, like you can't actually trap them in the product and increase your fees?
Absolutely. Again, in-kind is the norm in all other spot commodity
Right.
ETFs. All gold ETFs in-kind is possible. There's even a gold ETF where if you redeem as an individual shareholder, they can send you gold bars and coins to your door. They would like size it up and like send it to your door, and that's not
Really?
a taxable event. Yeah. There's like a
But most people, like, if you're gonna take like $100 million in kind on gold, like that's many trucks, right? It's like it's difficult.
Yeah. But again, for Bitcoin, very doable.
Yeah. With Bitcoin, you could do it from your cell phone.
Yes, but what I'm saying here is that that's allowed for gold.
Right.
We have a gold US ETF that does
Right.
that delivers gold coins to your door. It's not that it is legally not possible or
Right.
against the spirit of the securities laws or something. It is just an arbitrary point that was drawn, and like we're definitely motivated. I mean,
so we don't need any rule change.
We don't need any rule change. So the main thing that actually does not allow in-kind redemptions right now is that the APs, authorized participants, or like a specific entity. You think about broker dealers, like for our fund, it's like disclosed, like let's say like Goldman Sachs and like Jane Street and blah blah, or the broker dealers that can create and redeem shares. But the current situation is that the SEC says broker dealers cannot touch Bitcoin. So the reason in-kind is not possible is not because they specifically have something about in-kind. It's about two things. Only broker-dealers can create and redeem shares, and broker-dealers are not allowed to custody or touch Bitcoin. And if you say those two things, then in-kind is by kind of a derivative fact that it's not possible. Because you say only these regulated entities can create and redeem shares, and those regulated entities are not allowed to touch Bitcoin, then in-kind is just not possible. But am I hopeful about the broker-dealers being able to custody and service Bitcoin soon? I am. The reason I'm hopeful is that the tides are turning there, in the sense that like SAB 121 or like these types of arbitrary things about regulated entities not being able to touch Bitcoin, who's lobbying against those things? Who's like pushing the government on that? Actually, the banking lobby is now doing that.
Because they want to get involved.
Yes. Because like if you were a US bank and you like BlackRock, they're effectively custodying a lot of customers' Bitcoin and like making a ton of money on that.
Banks can't compete.
Why are we not allowed to do it?
Yeah.
Like why are you saying that like ETFs are possible and we shouldn't be able to service a Bitcoin for our clients? And so the arbitrariness in which the SEC has been kind of putting up these roadblocks are now being highlighted and pushed by banks.
Yeah, the incentives are kind of beautiful.
The incentive is kind of pushing through and create, and we're not even asking for any type of special treatment for Bitcoin.
No,
just let it treat it at
like non-special treatment.
Yeah,
you're asking for non-special treatment.
Everything else, like every other spot commodity. Like please, like let's just get it to that point. And so I'm hopeful, like that the in-kind stuff get resolved in not too distant future, because ultimately broker dealers and banks will solve that for us. Their business incentives will solve that for us. And then at that point, we can, all these things are really on the table. And
that'd be awesome.
Yes. For me, I would be the first person to say that the main con of a Bitcoin ETF in its current form is definitely the fact that you can't take it out in kind
without paying cap gains.
Exactly, because
You have to sell it for dollars,
Mhm.
pay cap gains, and then buy Bitcoin.
Exactly,
basically.
exactly. So if you buy, this is a very common experience. You buy some Bitcoin and then it goes up 10x, 100x,
Right.
and then you take it seriously. Like you
Yeah,
like
every GBTC holder understands this. That's why they're paying
Yeah.
1.5%
I'm-
because they have to. Otherwise, they have to pay 20-25%, whatever cap gain.
yes. Also, as a Bitcoiner, I am very much like everyone that feels comfortable doing so and like can educate themselves and should do self custody and do like
Right.
Interact with the network in a self-custodial way, because we need more people doing that for people to be using these products, have a larger user base. I mean, that the government is definitely coming after a lot of like self-custodial users, and the more users we have there, I think there can be definitely much more political pressure and agreement on like that being something that we want to. Anyway, there's just many reasons that like more people using the network directly is a good thing for the network, and ultimately there is no world in which Bitcoin fails and like our ETF succeeds.
Right.
So I want that as a Bitcoiner. I also want that as just like it just make the product better. Like again, like we shared a little bit in the beginning, but even though the 12 billion in the first year was a big chunk, what's coming in the coming years are much bigger.
Yeah.
So there's like we're nowhere close to thinking about like, oh, we'll like capture a little bit more and then like start raising fees and like
Yeah.
we'll be good. That's not where we're at. I think we're much more closer to like we want better products so that more people can buy this thing, and we want to have the best product so that we will win more market share.
Right.
Because how much market share of the dollars that we win in the coming years will determine whether we end up with 5% market share or 50% market share. And we want to be at 50%, not at 5%.
Right.
And so yeah,
Right.
we definitely want to make in-kind possible. And you know, I know that you're an ETF a skeptic, but like if we have
I own
in-kind,
no ETF shares.
yeah, totally.
I recommend BitB and own no BitB.
Yeah. Totally.
Full disclosure.
But if we
I own Bitcoin.
Yes. That's great. But if we have in-kind,
yes,
then I do think the ETF becomes a pretty useful product in
top of funnel.
Yeah, exactly. It is like
because when it goes up is when you realize why self-custody matters.
Yeah.
No one realizes why self-custody matters until it goes up.
Yeah. But even if you want more people to do self-custody, who learns to do self-custody? People that have a lot of Bitcoin.
That's what I'm saying. You learn as it goes up in value.
Exactly. So the main thing that if we want more people that own Bitcoin or self-custody Bitcoin, et cetera, is that we just want more people that have economic exposure to Bitcoin.
Right.
And if we think about the process now, if like opening up, like you have to open up you have to not only convince someone to like put in like just put in $100. Like you can't tell someone for the first time, like tell them to buy $10,000 worth of this thing. So you're gonna tell them to buy $100, but for that $100 they need to open up a new account, go through KYC AML, and then wire money or
it's ridiculous.
It's too high of a friction. So imagine the amount of like potential Bitcoiners that we're losing because we can't kind of convert. Like everything is to some extent, friction really matters on conversion. And as a top of funnel thing, it is true that Bitcoin ETFs are very like you can just convince someone to buy some, and then they probably have some brokerage account, and then a few taps. That's it. No accounts, no wires, no additional KYC. Like it's just
they just log into TD Ameritrade.
Schwab,
buy the ETF, and then when it goes up in value, they realize they want to take self-custody, and they go through the portal or whatever. They put their Bitcoin address, they take self-custody as it should be.
That is my ideal world.
Yeah,
that is my ideal world, and I don't think it is that far. Yeah, I don't think that is that far out.
I love it, Hong. Be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah. I mean, look,
even if that means less fees for OpenSats, I'm cool with that.
I don't.
You have my blessing.
Yeah. I just don't think that would mean less business for us. That like that's the thing that I also.
I think that would it would make your ETF way more competitive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That would be another reason why everyone would recommend it or make it as their first product that they allocate to. I mean, I think it is not. Yeah. So
we're aligned. That's dope.
Definitely.
Okay. Definitely. That's fucking awesome. Okay, I did not know that. I thought we needed an SEC rule change. So I didn't realize that was one of the things that just like everyone coalesced on just to get approved. That's awesome. Okay.
We're definitely having still even this week. Someone leadership from our team went to DC to meet with SEC people around in-kind specifically. So it's a thing that we're actively.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Talking about.
Thank you for your service. I will say, I mean, you compare it to like something like oil, where like during COVID, like we went negative because no one can take barrels of oil in kind. It's like the most insane thing. But like Bitcoin, you can take in kind so easily. It's designed.
It's the most natural thing.
It's designed for it.
It is designed for it. That's right. And but we're allowing it for gold to like them to ship it into your.
I can take in kind oil. Where am I going to fucking store the barrels? I don't know where I'm going to put it. I should have during COVID. I should just fucking figured it out and just taken a bunch of barrels of oil somewhere. It probably would have been an environmental disaster because I don't know how to store oil.
But we're making progress. Yeah, I do. Like, I guess it's tough to be too bright-eyed about the regulatory landscape right now, given the DOJ stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty bad right now.
But for the stuff that has very clear business incentive aligned, like there's no money to be made in private, or it's much harder. But with stuff like this, in-kind just needs broker-dealers and banks to be able to do business with Bitcoin. It's currently not allowed. They'll make it happen. And I think it is not controversial now. Like 5 years ago, if a bank wanted to custody Bitcoin and service it for their customers, I think most people, even the public opinion, would be that like that bank is crazy and reckless. I don't think anyone says that now about Bitcoin. So then now that the businesses see the business, want the business, will push it forward, I think it'll happen.
Let's fucking go. But it requires people like you and the Bitwise team to actually like make it fucking happen. So thank you.
You'll see it from us when it's possible. Yeah.
You did briefly mention during authorized participants Jane Street. I just wanted to do a huge shout out to Tim Reynolds. His foundation did support OpenSats. He's one of the co-founders of Jane Street. There's Bitcoiners everywhere, and they're standing up and making this thing happen. Hong, I want to talk about Nostr. You love Nostr.
I love Nostr.
You're on Nostr. You're a co-founder of a company that launched a Bitcoin ETF, and you're on Nostr. Why? Why are you on this ridiculous protocol that we're using?
Because I really think about Bitcoin as user-controlled money.
Yeah.
And I think there's a way of looking at it as like gold is like this kind of perfect thing that will always be found. And I think of it as like the users need to be vigilant and coordinate and defend this thing, because it is not it is our right, but our rights have to be defended. They're not always upheld. And so then if you imagine a type of world where users really need to be vigilant to maintain this network, if they aren't sovereign about the ways that they communicate to each other, then how is that coordination and resistance supposed to happen? Like, I don't know. If we're all on Twitter and there's a Twitter policy change and like
Elon just wakes up one morning, he's like, no Bitcoin talk,
then it's over. Or I mean, I'm being a little bit provocative here, but like
I like provocative.
I think it is not that hard to understand why kind of having sovereignty over your communication and identity network is critical to a sovereign money and the users and owners of that sovereign money. And I think the social layer is as important as the technology layer.
Yeah.
And as much as we care about the decentralization of like everything, the code, I mean, we should care a lot more there as well. I think this recent few weeks of like minor centralization is also something that we should, but as much as we care about, and so that also doesn't get enough attention. So like that's also a problem. But as much as we talk about that, I think we should also talk about like, do we have sovereignty over our communication?
I mean, we shouldn't be talking about like Bitcoin consensus changes on Twitter. Like, you need a fucking account. They like block people left and right. Like, come on, people, get your shit together.
And
Bitcoin consensus is not going to be won by Twitter debates. Get over yourself. Be better.
So there's one level there, and then I also am very excited about just like, I think this type of web of trust is like ultimately the identity layer for the internet that is compatible with the ethos of the internet, and also something that can still practically work.
Yeah.
I also think that I'm very excited about things like eCash.
I want to talk about eCash, but before we talk about eCash, are you going to delete your Twitter account, Hong? Or
Yeah. The reality of the matter is we're still, trying to run a business.
Honestly,
Yeah,
one of the best emails I ever got was you like, "Oh, Matt, will you join the Twitter Spaces, or is it just a demon app?"
No,
It was like one of the best things.
I felt a little bad. Like if I don't know what you're, I felt a little bad pulling you back into it, or like I don't know, but
I hadn't posted on Twitter in 6 months, but I joined your Twitter Spaces.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about you.
Yeah.
Proof of work.
Appreciate that. But yeah. I mean, like, I also recognize that a lot of these networks are really kickstarted by people that take a stance like you do, and it really just kind of make put a stake in the ground and say that this is where I'm going to talk, and like if you want to talk to me, come here. Because there's a network effect, and the beginning of the network effect is brutal. So some people have to make it so it's that like. Yeah,
I'm doing the same thing as you. I'm like the 5th largest Bitcoin ETF, and I'm Nostr only. I'm doing the same exact thing.
Yeah,
in a different way.
Yes. So
you don't have to delete your Twitter. I was just fucking with you.
Yeah.
I had to ask. eCash. We're pretty excited about eCash.
So excited about eCash. eCash. I think people trip over the fact that it's a custodial.
Yeah.
Whether it's single sig with like Cashew, or multi sig with like a federation with Fediment, etc. But I think like you have to think about it from like where it fits in. Like I think the Mutiny Wallet's approach is incredible.
Yeah.
Where like if someone is just trying to get $10 of Bitcoin,
right,
they should not be running a self-custodial Lightning node. Like I'm sorry, they should not.
Yeah.
But
they're
then
gonna like manage the liquidity to get a.
This is not like it's the same thing as like. I mean, how I feel a little bit about the Bitcoin ETF stuff as well.
Right.
Like, if someone's buying $10, $100, they're not gonna figure out. So it's just like not economically viable for them, and it's also not. If you add up that much friction, then they won't do it.
Right.
So I think it's very smart that they go eCash for a certain threshold of sats, and then when it goes, it's a larger balance, or the dollar value of it goes up, then they might change their mind.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just pretty obvious that like we still want a low dollar amount engageable custodial layer, because we still want people to start using Bitcoin for money.
Right.
And like the reality is that Bitcoin is not winning as much like a medium of exchange right now.
Yeah.
So we do need to make it easier for people. So that for the small dollar amount, and for the first kind of early part of the journey user using a custodial experience is like very obvious to me that is actually what they should do. But then do we want them to be just using like the current flavor of custodial services?
Right.
We have to KYC and AML, and like in certain jurisdictions they're not allowed to use it. Blah blah blah. I think if people are religious about the self-custodial Lightning, they need to be kind of clear with themselves that is the world that they are pushing towards.
Right.
That like everyone that onboards with KYC and AML, and like that type of not a custodial service that doesn't preserve your privacy. And I would rather the first step be a custodial service, because that's the economically viable thing, but in it being private. And that is what eCash is to me.
No.
And
it's cryptographically native.
That's native.
And even if you had an eCash custodian that was KYC AML, it would still be better than the current status quo, because they can't see your total balance and your transactions. Yeah. To me, it's like we live in a world where people are using custodians, so let's make the custodians better.
Yeah. And it's not just a temporary thing. I mean, Bitcoin transactions on the L1 will just always have economic costs.
Do you think mempools will clear?
Mempools will not clear.
Okay, guys. Thank you for joining us for Still Dispatch. We have Hong here.
I mean, I don't know if you imagine Bitcoin to do the thing that we want it to do. I mean, maybe not. Like at some point, we will get to a point where mempool is just not clear.
Yeah, it's an eventuality.
It isn't if Bitcoin either does not work or it's an eventuality. So like I want to when we're thinking about futures, talk about an eventuality, and in that world, like there's like a argument about like, oh, we're living in a KYCML world solely but like if it weren't, no, it's just this is the reality that at a certain SAT threshold, people will just not be able to open up Lightning channels and have that run itself. So like it is an economic reality in my mind, not a political reality. It is just an economic reality that the small SAT amount users will begin with custodial services that take that economic hurdle away from them.
They take the burden.
Yeah, and we want that because we want Bitcoin as money to work and win for everyone, not for a small group of people. So then we're living with a custodial element, not because we're lazy as Bitcoiners, but because that is the economic reality of the system that we have.
Yeah, if your first experience of Bitcoin is a 10 sat zap, like it's not going to be with on-chain guarantees. It's not going to be.
Yeah, and so in that world, then like it's also not that like I am like all KYC AML like it's bad and we should live in like a Wild West.
We're here to fix this.
But the thing that I believe in is that like it shouldn't be all or nothing.
Right.
It shouldn't be like you have to send your passport and like sell out your life versus like not being able to use anything. I mean, this is how I feel. Like this is in the physical world, that's often true, but in the digital world, in the same way we talk about proof of reserves, like being possible, like that thing not possible for gold and possible for, I think this is also thing available for privacy that people have not wrapped their mind around. Like right now, I go into a bar, they check my driver's license.
Yeah.
What are they? What are they trying to check? They're trying to check that I am not underage.
Yeah.
But I just because of the form factor, I have to reveal where I live, like what my date of birth is, what there's
By the way, I still give my grandfather shit that like it requires KYC for me to enter a bar. Like how do they not fight that? Like that seems ridiculous to me.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same but if we society doesn't agree that we don't want underage people to be able to go into spaces where people drink. We can agree that as a society.
Yeah.
But there's a kind of a violence in the current modality of privacy.
Yeah.
That it kind of forces people to do the kind of an overexposure.
Right.
And I think modalities like eCash start to get very interesting because now that we have the full toolkit of digital kind of encryption and privacy embedded to the assets, then now we're talking. We can negotiate as a society. What do we want? What do we want guarantees of? Do we want them to have to like literally reveal everything about themselves?
Right.
Or what is it? What is the guarantee that we want here that they're not sending to us? Or I mean that has problems. So I'm not advocating for that. But anyways, that's kind of what I'm excited about in the kind of eCash world.
What's up, guys? Are you going to record now? Is that okay? I was waiting for you to come here before I wrapped. If you didn't show up, it wasn't going to be proof of work. Rod just walked in. He wants to record a podcast, so we're kind of tight on time, so we're going to wrap it here. But he doesn't have the rest of his people, so we're not going to wrap it yet. I agree. I think options. I think the world we're going towards is options. I want to give people as many options as possible. I don't want to pick their prescription for them. I don't want to say this is how they should do things. I want them to be able to choose how they interact with the world, whether that's a speech perspective with something like Nostr or whether that's a financial perspective with something like Bitcoin. It should come down to options, right?
Yeah. Also, like, there's a difference between privacy and secrecy. I think the and really like privacy as like a right is about me having control over what I want to selectively reveal to people.
Cypherpunk Manifesto.
Yeah. I mean, a recent book that was really great was the Genesis book by Aaron Van Verdum.
Hey, awesome dude. Haven't read the book. Bought the book to support him.
You should read it. I mean, I thought it was the best. I mean,
I buy Bitcoin books. I don't read them.
Yeah. It really lays out like, I mean, there's something a bit of like a purity in what the cypherpunks were thinking about, because they were thinking about it prior to a lot of the economic incentives to think about it. And they were struggling with all these issues. And I think that, the articulation about privacy and secrecy and kind of like how, that also resonates with me. Anyways, so I'm excited about a world because they wanted to make it a reality in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
eCash, Chaumian eCash, and weren't able to do it. Why? Because it required banks to do it and dollars to do it.
It required permission.
Yeah. The underlying, you still need an asset to back it to do this kind of issuance of notes that are private, have privacy embedded. And you didn't have,
and they're bearer notes.
Exactly. So you didn't have the thing to back the bearer notes, and it had to be dollars or fiat money, and that it had to be banks, and then it had to be permission. So it just was an idea that didn't really get the full to live its life. And now we have an alternative. Now we have a fully endogenously digital asset in Bitcoin for the first time that we can now use to build all these systems that we dreamed of with different levels of privacy or for what people are comfortable with, or kind of different amounts of disclosure that people are comfortable with different entities that they're engaging with. We can give them that control and granularity. It was just not possible in the prior world. And before the conversation gets too dark, I think there's a way in which like the government is currently trying to bring a very blunt conversation to the privacy, like digital privacy, to financial privacy conversation. But it's going to be black or white, and it's going to be like for criminals or good people. And before it becomes too black and white, and we don't have a chance to build our case, like I think that's why pushing eCash now is so important, so that we can actually get it used for real people, for the real use cases, and kind of demonstrate this type of full spectrum privacy and full spectrum kind of sovereignty over that, such that when we are forced to negotiate as a society, like what should and shouldn't be allowed, then we have a lot more to show and demonstrate and like concretely talk about, because the physical analogs don't work. The physical analogs is just a driver's license. It's just like that it's black and white is the physical modality of privacy. So that's the only mental model people have. And to break people out of their mental model, that you just have to show them something that's different.
Give them a different option.
Yeah. And when people are showed is only when they really question their mental model.
Yeah, people are like, it's ridiculous that you're surveilling my $600 Venmo transactions, but they don't understand there's another option.
Yeah. And the regulations were written that way because there was no other way.
Yeah.
And so, or like, in some ways, even people pushing or lawsuits or like kind of the public discourse can't happen when there isn't an option. What I mean by that is that, like, okay, the initial internet was like all just public. There's no encryption, anything. There's no, we didn't have discourse about whether private communication online should be a right that we have.
Right.
Until encryption was actually a possibility.
Right.
You know, the internet happened in the 70s, 80s, and 80s, and it was gaining steam by early 90s. And until it was a practical option, we just didn't talk about it, because why? What would you talk about?
Right.
You know, but once public key cryptography kind of got to a point that it could be used, then people started using it. Then now there is a discussion to be had. And from like a rights perspective, of course, we have private conversations in a room. Like, why shouldn't we be able to have it in an online setting? Like, that makes no sense to me. But it still was a thing that we had to be fought, because the way that technology progresses is usually the non-private thing, public thing happens first, and the private thing comes after. And that's when you have a material thing to talk about, and you have to fight for it. And So like in some ways, I feel there's a lot of analogy to that in the current Bitcoin world, where like we fought that for public online communication, private online communication, but we didn't have to talk about financial transactions,
Right.
because it wasn't possible. It wasn't possible to have a private financial transaction. Because
private digital transaction.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Because we had cash.
We had cash. Exactly. So it's the same thing. Like
I walk into a bar, I pay cash.
Exactly.
Like, no one fucking knows what the fuck I'm doing.
Exactly.
And that was fine.
So we have it again. The same analogy is that we have privacy for financial transactions in the physical world. Just don't have it in the digital world. But just the way in which we are progressing here, we didn't have to have that conversation because it wasn't an option. And now that it's an option, it's becoming a problem and a conversation, and we're discussing it. Yeah.
Hong, you're a fucking legend. Thank you for being a friend and an ally. Freaks, I want to agree with Kieran. KYC is the illicit activity. It's not effective against criminals. They just buy or steal financial credentials to get into these sites, and it just affects regular people. I want to thank all the freaks who joined us in the live chat. You guys make this show unique and special. You guys are the true ride or dies. Thank you. I want to thank everyone who supports the show. Our biggest supporters this week was 8 Mythrander, Ride or Die Freak with 24,000 sats. We had V with 23,000 sats and Urza CC with 10,000 sats. We're going to have another Citadel Dispatch on Friday with Matt Hill of Start 9 at 1700 UTC, the usual time. RHR tomorrow at 1800 UTC, and I'm going to have some guests here in the studio. Don't tell Marty, he doesn't listen to Dispatch, so he won't expect it, but we're going to have some great guests live here in the studio at Bitcoin Park. Hong, this has been fucking awesome. I really do appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being a friend. I feel like it's been a whirlwind. It's been a crazy me and Hong have only been friends for about 6 months. It's a good friendship.
Yeah.
Right? It's a good friendship.
We went through a lot.
Yeah. Together.
Yeah.
With Gigi. Gigi, fucking boss, man. Running open sets. Hong, final thoughts before we wrap.
Excited for the future. But we have to fight for it. Like, I think the moment that we have to really, the users of the user-controlled money having to be vigilant and care for the whole stack, from like the software to the mining to the platforms that we have these conversations on, the communication channels like Nostr, to like how we make custodial financial transactions that are necessary at the onboarding stage more private, like eCash. Like, we just have to care for the whole stack. And as much as the opportunity is really big and kind of more and more real for us to be realizing these things, I think the urgency of making progress before we have to, the resistance becomes bigger, is that timeline is also shrinking. So excited for all of that. Excited for, and very thankful for what all you do as well. Yeah.
Appreciate you, Hong. Until next time, let's try and make this a reoccurring thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be awesome. Like, we said tip of the iceberg. We're at the tip of the iceberg. Let's do like an ETF update every 6 months or something like that.
Great. Yeah. Would love to do that.
Let's fucking go. Appreciate you, freaks. Stay humble, stack sats. Love you, freaks. Stay humble, stack sats. I'll see you Thursday, tomorrow, if you listen to RHR. But if you don't listen to RHR, I'll see you Friday. That was I Walk the Line by Johnny Cash, if you live under a fucking rock. But I've been told I need to tell you guys what I play. I love you all. Stay humble, stack sats. And if someone is going to buy an ETF, just recommend BitB. And otherwise, recommend self